Today, I want to show you how to make a custom sander for just $2 by yourself. This is the cheapest and easiest way to get this perfect angle. This video is for the designers and the leathercrafter who love to create. The reason I'm sharing this method is that I thought making this leather Lego man would be so simple. But when I started with this head, I was hit with all these unexpected deformations and gaps. That result inspired me to make a custom sanding tool. Trust me, you don't need to buy expensive equipment. What you really need is to make a simple tool by yourself. As a leather crafter, I used to fall into a trap, thinking that the more expensive the machine, the more capable it is. Like this sander, which is fast, efficient, but honestly, it has two fatal flaws. First, it has no sense of boundaries. When working with a power sander, the gesture is like my hand and the piece are just floating. I mean, every contact point, every angle, and the pressure, it all keeps changing. To make it accurate, I drew guidelines as reference. But you know what? I could only see one side at a time. I was so frustrated. So I found out that it's impossible to sand a straight line this way. The second is, it can't replicate symmetry. You know I need a signal, like an inspector to say, okay, stop right here. But the truth is, my hands are constantly shifting. I kept trying to fix one side to match the other, but success never happened. Moreover, because I didn't have the right grinder to deal with the internal curves, I was forced to compromise, to change my design to fit what I had. That was unacceptable. Finally, I learned that without a gauge, I'll never get what I want. The machine only provides power, it doesn't provide precision. That's why I spent over 10 days only to watch these scrap pieces go right back to zero. Since I've already had a failed piece as a reference, I just simulated it in my mind. If I could lock in the angle and the symmetry, I'll win most of the battle. Without knowing which would be better, I drew 3 angles and compared them with the old head. It turned out the 10 degrees was the best look. My first thought was, a hand tool should be comfortable, which means it needs a shape you can grip. This also allows me to get stable, continuous force while sanding. You better trim the axis, because too much length just creates more resistance. I prefer veg-tan leather. It's tough and hard. It's cheap and easy to cut. I started with 4 layers to test the effect at first. I'm using white glue to bond them together. What I suggest is that you need to wait for a while before gluing. But don't wait for it to totally dry out. I use double-sided tape to stick the sandpaper. In this way, it will be an easy replacement later. The gauge lets me know exactly how am I doing while sanding. But I noticed that this tool is just a bit too thin. I'm going to have to beef it up and make it thicker. This is the same method I used to set up the Lego man. What you only need is a chopstick. Cut it to the right size, through the hole, and sand it surface flat. In this way, you are unlimited. So here's the finished Lego head, and now every single corner is the same as I wanted, but then I hit another wall. How do I sand the internal angles? I used the other part of my custom tool to make an internal sander. But the problem is, this part has no physical limiter. I had to draw lines just to remind myself where to stop. But you might think that's enough to keep it straight. Trust me, it's not. The best way I found is using masking tape along the reference lines. It creates a much better visibility, like a mold for the corners. This part requires extreme patience, because every single stroke is hard. It's incredibly slow. But I finally made it. Let's peel it off and take a look. I say it looks pretty good. But to be honest, it would be perfect if I could refine those straight lines just a little bit more. So, how do we actually do that? I found that using CMC gel is actually the best way to help the leather layers fuse together and stay tight when they are dry. Once I got that, I prefer to use a wooden stick to press those fibers down before sanding. In this way, the unevenness appeared that to tell you exactly which spots are being touched. I believe only using CMC gel can get this. It's like a detective for the surface. So the next step is I'm going with 400 grade or higher grade sandpaper. Now, here's the key point. You must sand on a flat plane. And I have to be honest, no one wants to do it. It's so slow, and you are going to need a lot of patience. Then, I apply the same method to the internal angles. So what do you think? The leather returns to its original color once the gel dries, but you can feel it's much tighter and harder. I reapplied the CMC and repeated the whole process. When I polish it with the wooden stick again, and you know what? This is where the miracle happens. The leather suddenly darkened and became shiny. This proved the surface is perfect flight, and the density is finally high enough. Once you reach this, you know you've done it right. That's the secret of CMC gel I've discovered. And I'm really happy to share it with you. Also, here's the hardener I made my own. If you are wondering how to make it and use it to make your project hard and shiny, I've actually made a whole separate video for you. The link is in the comment. Check it out. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.